what's the most mundane thing you have trauma from? I'll go first. Washing dishes. When I was in high school, I had to go to school from 7 to 3, work from 3:30 to 10, then I'd have to come home and do a mountain of dishes because I lived in a 6-person household where no one liked their food touching, so they used every plate in the house every night. It was my job to wash dishes every night as a chore, and usually I'd get threatened with punishment if I didn't do them before I went to bed. I'd also get in trouble if I went to bed too late because I also had AP and honor homework to do right afterwards. I'd usually cap off at about 3 hours of sleep, 6 on weekends.
Studying. Simple plain studying. I can't sit down like a normal person and just study stuff. My mom used to force me to sit down and study for school the moment I came home from it. So I spend most of my days studying. Non-stop, and when I got exhausted, because that's what happens if you sit down a kid to study for that long and therefore made more mistakes, she got angry at me. Screaming, ripping apart my homework and books, the whole shebang. And even if I improved, I couldn't do anything correct. So I didn't even get the satisfaction of a job well done. At any rate, even if something interests me, and I desperately want to learn more about it, the simple act of studying makes my anxiety spike like crazy.
Same here. That's one of the reasons why I hated school, and particularly reading, because of her. I still have a lot of school-related trauma. My mom used to ridicule me as a child when I counted using my fingers. I especially struggled with math, and that caused many fights at the kitchen table, with her yelling at me for not applying myself, and me just crying because I genuinely did not understand the concepts, and she sucked at explaining them to me and constantly lost her patience. My mom is a special education teacher. By the way, I'm 32 and still count using my fingers despite having a bachelor's degree and being gainfully employed full-time. Nobody gives a fuck.
Up until college, when I moved into dorms, my mom would randomly barge into my study area / computer room just to check on me, aka criticize. I'm slouching, holding the pencil wrong, twiddling with my hair, not sitting upright on a couch while reading, holding books at an angle, not looking like I'm concentrating. It was hard to focus in spaces that weren't in my control, or if I felt physically exposed. I couldn't even study in an empty classroom without locking the door because I know there were people in the vicinity walking up and down hallways, and there was always a chance they would peek in. I ended up doing most of my studying after midnight, when I was sure the hallways would be empty, or in my room because I know for a fact my roommate had gone to bed and would not be able to see me studying. When I was an intern, I had a computer desk set up where my back was to the cubicle entryway. They sat me in most popular walkway, and I'd panic when I hear footsteps or shuffling, or when chairs move excreta because I literally couldn't see them coming. Couldn't change desks, so I up a few pieces of large cardboard as pseudo wall and door and roof, and my supervisor had me take it down when he found out. I ended up booking myself conference rooms, just so I can calm down enough to get some work done.
Vacuuming. When I was around 12, I think, my mother had removed my door and instructed everyone to look at me when they walked past, and as all bedrooms were connected to the same hallway, that was quite often. My room was always quite, or very, messy, and for once I had decided to clean it. I was on the floor vacuuming under the bed, when I heard laughter behind me by the doorframe, and I sat up and turned the vacuum off to see her leaning there just looking down at me. She kept laughing and pointing out how ridiculous I looked, and then called on my sisters to get out there to join her. My older sister heard and came out of her room to watch, but luckily didn't find it funny and looked quite apologetic, but I remember how painful it was and the insane amount of shame. After this I just bawled and stopped cleaning, and since then I only ever cleaned when I was home alone. It was so hurtful, especially since the main reason I had decided to do it that day was because my mom had asked to, and I wanted to make her happy. My husband is a narcissist. I married my mother, sadly. He has been working at home since 2020 in the office in the open loft we have. I cannot clean when he is home. Simply cannot. I hate it. After several years of this life, I have begun to think it is me not wanting to live in a clean house. But that isn't true. I simply cannot clean with him around because of his critical, controlling nature. He watches everything I do. As soon as I start to look less pathetic by creating a nicer living space, he finds ways to immediately sabotage me. Reading your comment has me realizing that my not cleaning anymore is a trauma response, not an inherent weakness within me. Thank you.
I'm so happy it was helpful. and I wish you all the best with healing. The absolute best way to keep narcissists from being able to get to you, in my experience, is by knowing yourself and keeping that knowledge as a focal point. Loyalty to your own well-being should be prioritized. No narc, mother, or husband should have access to your energy and spark. Reserve that for yourself and those who cherish you. Chores in general are an issue for me because I was never given a proper chance to learn how to do them. I kept being too slow or too sloppy for my NS, so I got sick of it and stopped altogether, which of course led to me being called disobedient, lazy, etc. Also, religious music. I detest IT most of the time because that's all I ever heard in that house and the NS car, unless obnoxious speakers were blaring. Now with my chosen family, music isn't an issue, but chores still are. I don't mind helping, but chosen sis is really particular about stuff, which makes it trickier, but thankfully not impossible. For me, it depends on the chore. For example, one thing I'm really hoping for once I'm able to move with my chosen family is a separate area, which drives chosen sis mad since she's convinced it'll make me less part of the family or some silliness, where I can run my little kitchen and possibly bathroom my own way, at least to a point. Unfortunately, chosen sis has, we suspect, undiagnosed ADHD, undiagnosed because she has a heart condition, and tends to leave stuff everywhere. While I don't want a mausoleum for a house with absolutely nothing out, I also wouldn't want no space to walk or make food either. I'm hoping that if I have my own little kitchen space, then I can reduce the number of dishes I add and keep up better with mine. I have cats, so I'd also need the sink in the kitchen and bathroom for water bowls and such. I'm also hoping to get a handle on bathroom chores and maybe laundry if I can manage it, along with basics for running the house, so not all the pressure would be put on sis if, God forbid, something ever happened to my chosen dad.
Chores are a big thing too. From complaining that I never do them, then not giving me a chance to actually do them, to not teaching how to, etc. My weirdest trauma is everything related to phone calls. Receiving one, missing one, having to call somebody, etc. It's hell tbh, especially because now everyone has the same ringtone, so I'm almost guaranteed to get random scare jumps in public spaces. Mother was extremely controlling about calling her when getting home from school, when away with other family members. Basically, anytime she decided she needed to know what happens. If I called or picked up, any fun would be over because she'd somehow find a way to be emotionally abusive, and I was genuinely scared of her voice. If I forgot to call or missed one, it would be hell as soon as I'd arrive at home.
That's very relatable. My main problem is that I became nervous about phone calls. Like, any type of phone calls, even if it's with the people I'm the closest to. Cause the other vicious part about her and phones was her weird obsession about helping me to overcome my shyness. Needless to say, I was a shy kid because I was fucking abused 24/7. She would make me call relatives or like services and stay there to control the conversation. Even when it went well and, for example, I made my point and booked an appointment somewhere, she would criticize everything. My tone, the words I used, whatever, and that would go on for hours. The consequences of this are crippling. I'm not a shy person. I don't have problems talking to people, etc., but anytime I have to make a more or less official call, FFS last time it was for an appointment at the vet clinic, I'm sweating, trembling, and no kidding, I have to write down bullet points for everything I need to say. It's ridiculous. Yes, I can blaze into anyone's office with a bit of positive self-talk, but unless you are beloved to me, a phone call just about slays me. Not to mention calling back someone I've already called before or missed a call from. Somehow that makes it even worse. I know my MIL loves and supports me, yet I was shaking trying to call her yesterday. It's very debilitating, though I'm not sure how much of mine is related to trauma and how much of it I am actually reliant on physical cues to help my conversations go better. I remember listening to my mom talk on the phone as a kid and being anxious or embarrassed because she always sounded anxious and embarrassed. Lots of false bursts of laughter and weird vocal tics. I'm remembering that I internalized some of that senseless noise-making stuff, and if I learned how to behave on phone calls from her, no wonder I always feel anxious, right? Wow. I came here to write this post. Anything related to phone calls really makes me feel unsettled. Even when I get a call from a strange number, my heart starts racing, all thanks to my mom calling 50+ times a day to check where I was. At university, she had a copy of my timetable and would even ask which train I was getting. I studied not too far from home. If I was even 2 minutes late, She would be calling me repeatedly, shouting and accusing me of having sex and being a whore. I still remember the paralyzing feeling looking down at the phone and still picking up.
While phone calls that used to be a big one because relatives were so cruel I didn't want to talk to them, but according to them they do nothing wrong, so I was just too sensitive. The anxiety of when a phone would ring used to drive me up the wall. Man, thankful I've removed those people from my life.
My mom the other day after I just got home and got my pants off and everything, she insisted I take the garbage out. I told her I would, eventually, like later after I got my bearings. It doesn't take me that long. She insisted I do it right then. So I got up, and being autistic, I was unable to hide my facial expressions, and yeah, I was a little bothered. Then she said, "You should know this," or something, and I just went, "The fuck do you mean?" And she was like, "Well, it's your job." So I put my hand up and told her to stop. It's my desperate warning sign to just let me gather myself before it escalates. And as I am getting dressed in my room, she walks past my room to get the garbage, bitching about it. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, woman, I was going to do it. You saw me moving.
Driving. When I was learning how to drive, I would get screamed at from the passenger seat. Once I got punched in the arm with my hands on the wheel. Took a lot to undo the driving anxiety and still not completely undone. Me too. I really feel for you. This happened to me when I was 16 and it's taken me to the age of 47 to finally enjoy driving. So 31 years. It's so sad, all the years that are wasted feeling anxious while driving. I can still hear my dad yelling at me to stop stalling the engine while trying to take off, manual transmission, and if I stalled it again I'd get hit. I eventually learned to drive from reading books in the library about cars and taking my car out to deserted streets to practice. I used to tremble a lot and I still do from time to time. I wish you the best. I truly understand what you're going through.
Oh God, this happened to other people too. It's not quite the same, I'm sure, but I had something like this happen to me. I was driving at idle around an empty parking lot late at night with my dad in the passenger seat, so I could get a feel for the car. My dad suddenly starts yelling at me to stop. 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 As loud as he could in my ear. So I slam on the brakes and, still trembling with adrenaline, ask him why he did that. What's wrong? Oh, I just wanted to make sure you were paying attention, he says while grinning ear to ear. It was the first and last time I would ask for his help with learning how to drive, and I would pay a driving instructor at school for driving experience instead. I'd bet money that if you crashed the car he'd blame you for not paying attention, being reckless, blah blah. Context. I was 15 to 16 years old and had some experience handling a different car in a big parking lot, but not actual main road driving. Once my dad decided to let me drive his broken power steering car on the main road, not a parking lot, the road halfway home. He stopped in a parking lot and said, "Your turn, go ahead and drive." I said, "Are you crazy? I don't even have a learner's permit yet." He said, "It'll be fine." So I drove, and in the car, Dad kept making the noise you make when you're nervous. In my head I was like, if you were scared of me driving, why'd you decide to let me drive then? You're making me more nervous. Everything was fine until I had to turn left to head home. After a fairly straight path, I overestimated how wide I turned and went up the curb. Luckily, I didn't hit anything. Unluckily, it was a green light for the cars going straight, but they saw what happened and let me readjust. If I had crashed into something, my dad would have been like, "Man, I shouldn't have let you drive." In my head, I would have said, "Why, think?" Especially since that car has a broken power steering that you know about.